I'm a 22-year-old guy, and I'm starting to think the 19-year-old girl I'm dating might be cheating on me with her dad's 38-year-old friend. This might sound crazy, but here it goes. I've been dating this girl, let's call her Emily, since late June. For the most part, things have been great between us. We have a lot in common, and I really like her. The other day, though, we were walking, and I was telling her something important, but she seemed totally uninterested. I glanced over and noticed she was texting a number that wasn't saved in her phone. She looked up at me with this weird expression and quickly turned her phone off. I didn't want to jump to conclusions or start an argument, so I just let it slide. The next day, she invited me over. Now, I like to surprise her, it's kind of my thing, because I love joking around. When I got there, her parents knew I was coming, but they didn't tell her. So I walked into her room, and when she saw me, she jumped up, smiling, but she was on her phone texting. I leaned in for a kiss and caught a glimpse of her texting the same number again. She was typing fast, sent the message quickly, and turned off her phone right away. Something she never does. She was acting kind of awkward after that. I stepped out of the room for a minute to calm down, then asked if we could talk seriously. She could tell where I was going with this, but didn't say anything. So I broke the silence and asked, "Who's the person you've been texting that's not saved in your phone?" She replied, "I can't say because it's embarrassing." I'm thinking, what the heck? That's a weird way to answer. I threw out a few names, and one of them was her dad's friend. I had met him before. Her parents made him drop her off at my place once. She had mentioned early on that he was super creepy and had flirted with her a lot in the past. When I guessed it was him, she made this strange face. Like she was shocked I even knew about him. She tried denying it at first, then finally admitted it was him, but insisted it was no big deal. I told her it was weird she was texting a guy who had flirted with her before, especially since he's her dad's friend and coworker. She swore up and down that it was nothing, saying they were just talking about random stuff like Biden and Kamala Harris. She even offered to show me their messages, but I said no and let it go for the moment. A few days later, I still caught her texting the guy. Then, 2 mornings ago, we were hanging out at her place just joking around. Her phone slipped out of her hand, and when I bent down to pick it up, guess who I see texting her first thing in the morning? It was him again. She looked stunned when I handed her the phone back, and it just ruined my mood. I told her I had to go, and she kept asking what was wrong. I finally told her it was super weird that she was still texting this guy. I mean, there's no way I should feel like I'm competing with some 38-year-old dude. She flipped it on me, calling me the bad guy for being upset and questioning her about it. I told her I was going to tell her dad. She went from not caring to suddenly begging me not to, saying her parents were super strict, which is true. They'd probably take everything away from her. She asked if I really wanted that for her, and I couldn't believe that was all she cared about. I knew something was up. I eventually left really upset, and then later I got a TikTok notification. She had reposted something that said, "Me telling my BSF about my new illegal age gap." I texted her, "All right, dude," and she played dumb, acting like she didn't know what she'd done, and immediately removed the repost. I still feel like I should tell her dad. I'm cool with him and I know this would blow up, but I can't shake the feeling that she's cheating on me. I really hope I'm just overthinking this. Update. So, almost a month ago, I posted about my girlfriend possibly cheating with her dad's friend, and people wanted an update, so here it is. After all that, I really wanted to make things work. I decided to let it go when she convinced me that nothing was happening. I kept my eye on her, though. She told me she had told him they should stop texting because it was getting weird, especially with him being her dad's friend. I didn't really believe her. I figured she was just saying that so I wouldn't bring him up again. I kept catching her texting him from time to time, but I didn't want to keep bringing it up and ruin things between us. At one point, I was staying at my job because I was looking for a new place, and she would come over to visit me after work sometimes since we work at the same place. One day, she came over, and I was showing her my vinyl collection. Out of nowhere, she glanced at her phone, then at me, and started acting strange. Eventually, she said, "My ride is here, I gotta go." As I was putting my records away, I asked, "Who's picking you up?" She hesitated, then turned back and said, "My parents are at an appointment, so you should know who's picking me up." I was like, "Didn't you say you guys stopped texting?" She tried to brush it off, saying it was just a ride home and not a big deal. She had a point, so I let it go again, told her to get home safe, and that was that. Now, again, I had let it go at the time. Now, everyone at work knows that her and I were together, and one of the ladies had pulled me aside and asked me if me and the girl are still together, and I told them, yeah, and she told me that she's been seeing her go into someone else's car all recently on my day offs, happy and smiling, and I asked what color car, and she had told me a blue car. Her dad's friend drives a blue Tesla. So I was kind of annoyed, but I want to bring it up with her. Until Monday, she wanted to hang out with me. I got a new place not too far from where she's at. I had brought it up to her and she got mad and was trying to lie, saying, "That's not true," until I got very descriptive and she pretty much told me everything while this was happening. She was texting him and I had noticed that too, but we hung out, had a great ass time. There was a lake by her house and we went into it fully clothed and we was all over each other and flirting mad hard. And then we went back to her house and I was there with her family having a good time. After I went home, I told her I had fun. She told me she had fun too. Everything was fine until in the afternoon she was saying how she thinks she's mad at herself and texted me she shouldn't have been all over me the way she was, and it was a mistake. And I told her, don't beat yourself up, because it wasn't only on her, I was all over her too. Then she told me we should be friends, and I'm surprised now because like that came out of nowhere. And she was like how she can't see herself with me. That went south after that. I then asked her, since we're being honest with herself, are you talking to someone else? And she said she's open to it and wants to see other people. And I told her like how I seen her texting her dad's friend that day prior when we was hanging out, and she had gotten mad and was like, stop looking at my phone. I'm just not gonna be on my phone around you no more. And it felt so weird because no way she's making me feel like I'm wrong for pointing that. And then she said she didn't want to be friends with me at least and wanted nothing to do with me. And it genuinely sucked because I really liked her and I was there for her when she was down, and she would always put herself, and I always hated that she did that. So that next day I told her dad about everything and told him about his friend and how him would always text her and has flirted with her in the past. And I gave him proof. I was kind of scared, but it was a relief. I finally did it. Everyone on Reddit, IRL, and my therapist told me I should tell him, and I did, and he thanked me for that and was gonna talk to her about it. I guess he did, cause this morning I seen her and she looked out of it and she was avoiding me but looking at me, and then I got a text from her saying, thank you for telling my dad, and I mean that genuinely. I'm certain that was sarcasm, then texted me again like 30 minutes after saying, what was my motive behind it? I still haven't responded yet. So pretty much this will be the final update. Her dad screenshot 6 hours worth of messages between her and his coworker/friend. The family doesn't speak to her that much cause of it. She cried in my face and I felt bad. She had told me she's off her meds and really kinda had worried me. I also found out she was texting a guy on Bumble and we had gotten into it lastly. Cause of it, we haven't spoken since. I blocked her on everything. Here's the real last update. In July, when her and I was on her phone watching Snap vids, and there was a guy, M20, that texted her, and I moved away from her, and she looked at me weird, and I was like, who was that? And she didn't know what to say. Her face was red, and like, she still couldn't answer me, which kind of worried me. She eventually told me that he was a guy she knew online. He went to a different HS, but they knew each other because of one person that knew them both. I found his IG to see what he had looked like, and she gotten mad, and I started overthinking badly. Especially because he found my TikTok and started viewing my profile. I started viewing his shy too, but I started feeling bad because what if she was telling the truth, and I apologized for it. Now she threw it back in my face last week how I got mad about it. Last night I finally hit him up to see if they had anything, and he told me she told him about me, how I wanted her but she wants to be friends, which is an outright lie because we was dating, we kissed, we had sex, we held hands, laid on each other, and I met her parents. He told me they hung out on the 4th of July, and I remember her telling me she was out with family and neighbors that day and was barely texting me. I asked him if they did anything. He said they kissed, but that's really it, and left for college. He also told me that he used to cut grass where her and I work, and that's how they met. I really feel betrayed, man. It's not the first girl that's did that to me. And the fact that it was 2 guys is what hurting me more, honest. She made me feel like shit for overthinking it, and I took accountability for it. I don't want anyone after her. I don't want to get married. I don't want anything. I just want to be alone. I really appreciate the messages and replies y'all sent my way. Thanks. So I tried to let it go again, but things started getting weird at work. One of the ladies pulled me aside and asked if Emily and I were still together. I told her we were, and she said she had seen Emily getting into someone else's car on my days off, looking happy and smiling. I asked what kind of car, and she mentioned a blue one. Emily's dad's friend drives a blue Tesla. I was annoyed, but I didn't want to confront her just yet. Then, on Monday, Emily wanted to hang out. I had just moved into a new place not too far from hers, and when she came over, I brought up what I'd heard. She got mad and started denying it, but as I got more specific, she eventually admitted everything. While she was talking, I noticed she was still texting him. Despite all that, we hung out and had a great time. There's this lake near her house, and we ended up going in fully clothed, messing around and flirting hard. Later, we went back to her place, and I even hung out with her family. When I got home, I texted her saying I had fun, and she said the same. Everything was fine until later that afternoon, when she started saying she felt mad at herself. She texted that she shouldn't have been all over me like she was, and that it was a mistake. I told her not to be so hard on herself because I was all over her too. It wasn't just her. Then, out of nowhere, she said we should just be friends. I was totally blindsided. She went on about how she couldn't see herself with me, and things just went south from there. I asked her straight up if she was seeing someone else. She admitted she was open to it and wanted to explore other options. I brought up how I'd seen her texting her dad's friend when we were hanging out, and she got defensive, telling me to stop looking at her phone and that she wouldn't be on her phone around me anymore. It felt so weird, like she was making me out to be the bad guy for pointing it out. She then said she didn't even want to be friends anymore and wanted nothing to do with me. It really hurt because I genuinely cared about her, and I'd been there for her when she was down. She always put herself first, and I hated that she did that. The next day, I decided to tell her dad everything. I told him about his friend, how he was always texting her, and that he'd flirted with her in the past. I even showed him proof. I was nervous, but it was a relief to finally get it off my chest. Everyone in my life, in real life, even my therapist, had told me I needed to say something, and I did. Her dad thanked me for telling him and said he was going to talk to her about it. I guess he did because the next morning I saw her and she looked completely out of it. She was avoiding me but kept glancing my way. Then I got a text from her saying, "Thank you for telling my dad, and I mean that genuinely." It definitely felt sarcastic. About 30 minutes later, she texted again, asking, "What was your motive behind it?" I haven't responded yet. So here's the final update. Her dad sent me screenshots of hours worth of messages between Emily and his coworker friend. The whole family is barely speaking to her now because of it. She cried in front of me and I felt bad. She told me she's off her meds, which really worried me. I also found out she was talking to some guy on Bumble, and we got into a huge argument over it. We haven't spoken since, and I've blocked her on everything. The real last update goes back to July. Emily and I were on her phone watching Snap videos, and a guy, let's call him Mike, 20, texted her. I pulled back and she got this weird look on her face, all red and flustered. When I asked who he was, she hesitated before saying he was someone she knew online. They had met through a mutual friend. I ended up finding his Instagram to see what he looked like, which made her mad, and I started overthinking everything. Mike even found my TikTok and started looking at my profile, so I checked his stuff out too. I felt guilty because what if she was telling the truth? I apologized for overreacting, but she threw it back in my face last week, bringing up how I got mad about it. Last night, I finally reached out to Mike to see if they had anything going on. He told me that Emily had said I was just a guy who wanted her, but she only saw me as a friend. That was a lie, of course, because we were dating, kissing, sleeping together, holding hands. I'd even met her parents. Mike said they hung out on the 4th of July, which she had told me she spent with family and neighbors. That day, she barely texted me. I asked if they did anything, and he said they just kissed before he left for college. Mike also mentioned he used to cut grass at our work, which is how they met. I feel completely betrayed. This isn't the first time a girl's done this to me, but having it happen with 2 different guys at the same time just makes it worse. She made me feel like I was overthinking everything, and I took the blame for it. Now, I don't want to be with anyone else. I don't want to get married or anything. I just want to be alone. I really appreciate all the messages and support you guys have sent my way. Thanks. Now on to the next story. Wild story. This is something I'll never forget for as long as I live. Made an account just to share it. Sorry, James Carter. Back in 2006, I was living and working on a small island in the Caribbean. I had a 3-bedroom apartment in town all to myself, though sometimes my family would visit and stay with me during their vacations. I worked for a small distribution company that dealt with the alcohol industry, and around that time, my boss was trying to sell off one of the beer lines to another distributor on a nearby island, a quick 15-minute flight away. The potential buyer was a man named James Carter, who was the son of the owner of the interested company. James was in his mid-30s and came from one of the wealthiest families on his island. The plan was for him to fly in on a Friday morning, have a meeting with my boss, and then fly back that evening. Meanwhile, my uncle was visiting with his wife and their 3 kids, twin 4-year-olds and a 1-year-old, staying with me at my apartment. Keep that detail in mind. It's going to be important. So James flies in and I meet him at the airport. I drive him over to our office where my boss and my uncle, who's also a friend of my boss, are already waiting. They sit down and talk for a few hours and then they decide to grab some lunch before James's flight at 4 p.m. We head out, grab some food, and of course they start drinking. What was supposed to be a couple of drinks turns into several, and before long, James realizes he's missed his flight. He calls the airline, rebooks for the first flight out the next morning, and I'm now in charge of getting him to the airport. No big deal. We decide he can crash at my place since my room has 2 double beds. My uncle and his wife are in one room, their kids in another, and James and I will share the 3rd room. After we get back to the office, we make plans to take James out for dinner later that evening, just to show him a good time. Dinner rolls around and we head to a nice restaurant, enjoy some food, and have a few more drinks. We keep the night going by hitting a few bars, and eventually we make our way to the local strip club. We continue partying until about 3 a.m., when we finally decide to call it a night. I'm completely drunk by this point, and as we get back to the apartment, I turn to James and say, "Man, I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed. Don't forget you've got to be at the airport by 6 a.m. James tells me he's going to stay up and watch some TV since he's not tired. I tell him that's fine, and I head to bed. A couple of hours later, I'm suddenly woken up from a deep sleep. I open my eyes to find my uncle, my aunt, and their 3 kids standing in my room, staring at me with shocked expressions. I'm still half drunk and confused, so my first thought is that I must have slept through my alarm and James missed his flight. I ask, "What's going on?" My uncle just says, "Come with me." I get up, still groggy, and follow him out of the bedroom, past my visibly shaken family, and down the hallway toward the living area. And that's when I see it. Something I will never be able to erase from my memory. James is passed out on the couch, completely naked, except for his belt, which is still around his waist. His clothes are neatly folded on the coffee table, and he is covered head to toe in human feces. It's smeared in his hair, on his face, all over his chest and legs. There's even handprints of it on the walls beside the couch. The stench hits me like a freight train. It's so overpowering that I instantly sober up. All traces of sleepiness disappear as I stand there, trying to process the scene in front of me. My uncle turns to me and says, "Grab a leg." As we approach the couch, I notice an empty vodka bottle on the floor, but in my shock, it doesn't immediately register. We each grab one of James's legs, drag him off the couch, and pull him into the bathroom, leaving a trail of poop smudged across the floor behind us. It's like we're dragging a giant paintbrush covered in filth. Once in the bathroom, we throw him into the shower, turn on the water, and leave him there. We go back to the living room to survey the damage, and that's when I finally connect the dots about the empty vodka bottle. I remember that I had a full, unopened bottle of vodka in the freezer, and I think to myself, there's no way this guy would have... But sure enough, I head into the kitchen, and there's a puddle of pee right next to the freezer. I carefully step around it, open the freezer, and my bottle of vodka is gone. James must have found it, polished off the whole thing, and this mess was the result. My uncle grabs a mop and heads back to the shower, and I follow him, still trying to wrap my head around everything. I watch as he uses the mop to scrub James down like he's cleaning a dirty floor. We then throw some of my clothes onto James, carry him down to the car, and I drive him to the airport while my aunt and uncle tackle the cleanup. When we get to the airport, I'll never forget the look on James's face. He's half asleep, still drunk, and looks completely miserable as I lean over to open the passenger side door. I give him a little push, he stumbles out, and I slam the door shut before driving off. When I get back to the apartment, the couch is already out on the sidewalk, ready to be picked up by the trash collectors. My aunt has done a great job mopping and disinfecting the floors. I ask my uncle how he even found James like that. Did he just wake up early and stumble upon the disaster? That's when my uncle explains the kicker. His twins had woken up early to watch cartoons, like they usually do. They're at the age where they can get out of bed on their own, turn on the TV, and let their parents sleep in a bit longer. So these poor kids wander into the living room and are the first to see James in all his naked, poop-covered glory. They run back to their parents' room, shouting, "Mommy, Daddy, there's a naked man on the couch." My uncle rushed out of bed, and that's when he saw James, sprawled out, naked and with porn playing on the TV. The porn might explain why he stripped down, but why he left his belt on, that's a mystery I still can't figure out. To wrap up the story, I never saw James again after that. I have no idea if he even remembers what happened that night. He did end up buying the beer line from my boss though. Maybe he bought it out of sheer guilt for all the chaos he caused. Guess we'll never know.